Judge Grayson thought he was about to sentence a clueless teenager, but everything changed when the young man began to break down the case like an experienced lawyer. The air inside the Los Angeles County Courthouse felt heavy, almost hard to breathe. The seats were full of people whispering as they watched the scene in front of them. The defendant's table seemed too large for the young man standing beside it. His hands were in his pockets, and his chin was raised just enough to show he was not scared. His name was Jalen Dawson, 19 years old, accused of stealing a car and resisting arrest. The charges were serious, but the look on Judge Walter Grayson's face showed that the real judgment was not just about the law. The judge leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the wooden desk. He stared at Jalen over his glasses with a smirk that almost looked like a laugh. "Do you think you're some kind of legal expert?" he asked with a dry voice. "This is not a debate club, kid." A few people in the courtroom laughed. Even the prosecutor and the court staff seemed to think it was funny. But Jalen did not smile. He had spent years preparing for this moment. Not to stand here as a criminal, but to stand in a courtroom he already knew well. While other kids memorized sports scores, Jalen memorized case laws. While his friends played video games, he imagined trials in his head and argued with himself like a lawyer. His mother, Denise Dawson, had worked as a paralegal for more than 20 years. And Jalen grew up hearing real courtroom stories, how prosecutors sometimes cheated, how judges took sides, and how some defense lawyers did not even try. By the age of 14, he could understand a trial better than many law students. But none of this mattered to Judge Grayson. To him, Jalen was just another kid in trouble. "Let's make this quick," the judge sighed as he opened the file. "I have a golf game at 2. The audience laughed again, but this time Jalen showed a small smirk. The judge had already made his first mistake, but nobody else saw it yet. The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, stood up like a man who already believed he had won. His suit was perfect, his voice confident. "Your Honor, the state will prove that the defendant, Jalen Dawson, was caught in a stolen 2022 Audi A6. He tried to escape through downtown before police arrested him. His fingerprints were found on the steering wheel. The evidence speaks for itself." People in the audience whispered. It sounded like a simple case, a stolen car, a chase, an arrest. Judge Grayson nodded as if everything was already clear. But Jalen had studied too many trials to miss the weak points. He stayed silent and waited. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. "All right, let's hear the defense." He looked at Jalen's public defender, Lisa Thornton, who had barely spoken. She stood up nervously, but before she could begin, Jalen touched her arm, asking her to stop. She sat back down. For the first time, Jalen spoke. "I will represent myself, Your Honor." The room went silent. Judge Grayson stared at him, shocked and amused. "You'll what?" he asked. Jalen's voice stayed calm. "I will be my own lawyer." "I will be defending myself," Jalen said. A wave of whispers moved through the courtroom. Even the bailiff looked surprised. The prosecutor, Carrington, stopped smiling for a moment, then let out a short laugh. "This should be interesting," he said. But no one was laughing when Jalen took his first step forward, because everyone could feel the change in the room. The courtroom felt heavier as Jalen stood tall, his hands still in his pockets. He waited in silence just long enough to make people uncomfortable, then finally spoke. "Your Honor, before I begin, I want to confirm something with the prosecution." Carrington crossed his arms and nodded. "Go ahead." Jalen stepped closer. "You said Officer Daniel Ruiz personally saw me inside the car before I was arrested." "Correct," Carrington answered quickly, already sounding annoyed. "That's right. It's written in his report." Jalen nodded again, then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I request that this testimony be removed as evidence." Judge Grayson narrowed his eyes. "On what grounds?" Jalen finally took his hands out of his pockets and pointed toward the prosecutor's table. "Because Officer Ruiz never saw me in that car. He wasn't even on duty when the chase began." Carrington's face changed for the first time. "What are you talking about?" Jalen stayed calm. "Your Honor, I request access to Officer Ruiz's GPS logs from that night. If he wrote that he witnessed me in the car, then his location should match the report." "But," he paused, "I don't think it will." People in the gallery began whispering again. Judge Grayson looked at Carrington. The prosecutor's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, that report was written by a trained police officer." Are we really going to trust a defendant over a professional? Jalen gave a slow shrug. If the officer was where he said he was, the GPS will prove it. If not, he didn't need to finish the sentence. The judge watched him for a moment, then asked Carrington, "Does the prosecution object to verifying the officer's GPS logs?" Carrington paused, just a little too long. The jury noticed, the audience noticed, and most importantly, the judge noticed. Finally, Carrington sighed. "No objections, Your Honor." But the damage was already done. For the first time, the courtroom was no longer laughing. The silence was thick, and everyone felt the shift. Carrington quickly tried to recover. "While we wait for those records, the fact remains that the defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of the stolen vehicle." Jalen nodded calmly. "That's true," he said. "But let's talk about what that really means." He looked at the jury, making eye contact with each person. "The prosecution wants you to believe that fingerprints automatically mean I stole the car. But think about this. If you go into a clothing store and try on a jacket, your hands touch it, your fingerprints stay on it. Then you put it back and leave. If someone steals that jacket later, does that mean you did it?" Some jurors shifted in their seats. Someone in the audience whispered. Jalen didn't stop. The car was parked outside a 7-Eleven hours before the theft. I was in that store with 3 friends. When we walked past the car, I leaned on it. I even opened the door because it was already unlocked. I didn't take it. I didn't drive it. I didn't steal anything. It was a stupid moment of curiosity. He let the room sit in silence for a few seconds, then asked a single question. "Does touching something make you a criminal?" Carrington flipped through his papers, searching for something to say, but Jalen was not finished. He took another quiet breath and continued. "Let's talk about how the fingerprint evidence was tested," Jalen said. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor, was the forensic specialist in this case asked to appear in court?" Judge Grayson looked surprised by the question. He turned to the prosecutor. Carrington hesitated, then quietly said, "No." Jalen pressed his lips together. "So let me understand this. The state is using fingerprint evidence to try to convict me, but they didn't bring the person who tested that evidence. That means I can't ask questions about how the fingerprints were handled, who touched the evidence, or whether the test was accurate." Carrington's jaw tightened. Jalen nodded like he expected that answer. "Interesting." Judge Grayson rubbed the bridge of his nose. It was clear he was finally realizing this case wasn't going to be quick or easy. But Jalen wasn't finished, not even close. He took another step forward. "Your Honor, I would like to submit a statement from the owner of the vehicle." The judge looked confused. "The owner?" "Yes," Jalen said. "Mr. Raymond Whitaker, the legal owner of the Audi that was stolen. He gave a statement to the police, but for some reason, the prosecution never included it in their files." He turned toward Carrington. "Do you remember what Mr. Whitaker told the police the night the car was stolen?" Carrington stayed silent. He already knew what was coming. Jalen opened a printed transcript and read from it. "I left my car running while I went inside the gas station. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off, but it wasn't the guy you arrested. I saw the kid and he was white." The courtroom gasped. Jalen held up the paper. "This is from the original police report, the same report the prosecution decided not to mention." He turned back to the judge. "The officer left this out of his testimony. The prosecution ignored it, and yet they want this jury to believe I, someone who doesn't even match the description, am guilty beyond a reasonable doubt." The prosecutor jumped up. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant." "The defendant was found with the vehicle." Jalen shook his head calmly. "No, I wasn't. I was arrested blocks away from where the car was found while walking home with snacks. I wasn't inside the car. I wasn't near the car. I wasn't running from anything. The only thing connecting me to this crime is bad police work and assumptions." The judge took a deep breath. The case was falling apart fast, and everyone could see it. Jalen looked at the jury. The real thief got away. The police found a black kid nearby and decided he was close enough. That's what this case is really about. The room went quiet. Judge Grayson finally asked, "Does the prosecution have anything else?" Carrington stood stiffly. "No, Your Honor." The judge looked at Jalen, then at the jury. After a long pause, he leaned forward and said the words that no one expected. "Case dismissed." There was a moment of stunned silence, and then the courtroom exploded. Some people were shocked, others relieved. Reporters were already writing notes. But Jalen stayed still, letting the moment sink in. The judge looked at him again, this time with something different in his eyes. Respect. Maybe even regret. Jalen met his stare, then turned to walk toward the exit. But before he reached the door, the judge spoke. "Mr. Dawson." Jalen stopped but didn't turn around. "You should consider law school," Judge Grayson said. Jalen smirked. He didn't need to consider it. He was already planning on it. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved toward him. "Jalen, did you know the judge would dismiss the case? What are you going to do next? How does it feel to beat an experienced prosecutor?" Jalen pulled his hoodie over his head and walked past them without answering. He didn't care about the reporters or the cameras. This wasn't about showing off or proving he was smart. It was about something much more important. His mother, Denise, was waiting for him at the bottom of the courthouse steps. Her arms were crossed, and her face didn't show what she was feeling. She just stared at him for a moment in complete silence. Then she finally shook her head and breathed out. "Boy, you scared me half to death." Jalen smiled and scratched the back of his head. "Had to take a risk." "Ma," she looked at him for another second, then pulled him into a tight hug. "You always were the stubborn one." The cameras kept flashing, but Jalen didn't care about them anymore. Across the street, Judge Grayson stood beside his car, watching. His posture was different now. The arrogance was gone. His face wasn't amused. It looked thoughtful, almost humbled. He had never expected this case to be anything special. Just another day, another defendant, another guilty verdict. But now he knew he wouldn't forget this one, because Jalen had done something most people never could. He made the system look at itself, and for once, the system backed down. And here's the real lesson. How many other cases had gone the same way? How many people were found guilty not because of evidence, but because of bias, laziness, and a system that cared more about closing cases than finding the truth? Jalen had the knowledge to fight back. But what about the people who didn't? This wasn't just one case. This was a sign of something bigger. Jalen already knew what he was going to do next. This wouldn't be the last courtroom he stood in. But next time, he wouldn't be the defendant. He'd be the attorney, and when that day came, he wouldn't be the only one. If this story made you think even for a second, share it. The justice system is built on laws, but it's run by people, and people can change, but only if we make them. So hit that like button, subscribe for more real stories that matter, and keep the conversation going. Because next time, it might not be Jalen, it might be someone you know.